Good morning, class. This is Mr. DeVries again. And what we want to do today is launch into one of our final units, Unit I, on the executive branch. So in preparation for that, I'd like to have you read Chapter 13 on the presidency, and then we'll be taking a closer look throughout this unit at chapters 13, 14, and 15, and possibly 16 in regards to the executive branch of the government. So let's begin today then by taking a look at these 5 sections of chapter 13, the job description, presidential selection, nomination, and the election itself, understanding that the president who now sits, you may not have voted for or may have, but they of course exist because God has ordained them into power. The officials in the executive branch, including the president, serve God through his providence. Therefore, we honor the authority of those heading the executive branch. The president himself has many roles or hats. One of the activities we'll be doing in class is to find the president carrying out one of these various roles via a newspaper article. So you will find a newspaper article with the president doing something. He must be doing something. Then you're going to analyze what the president is doing and determine if he's acting as chief of state, which is a ceremonial head representing all the people of America in a formal way, such as a state dinner or reception. Or possibly he's acting as the chief executive, similar to a CEO of a major company, making executive decisions and planning and leadership. Administrator, much like the administrator of your school, would make decisions on hiring and firing and making plans and policies and implementing them. Possibly you'll find him doing that in a newspaper article. Or possibly negotiating with foreign dignitaries to maybe bring about a treaty. Another important role is commander-in-chief. The president automatically is the commander-in-chief of all of the armed services. Occasionally, the president will also act as chief legislator. Now, I know this is the executive branch, not the legislative branch, but again, there are checks and balances between the three branches for power. The president acts also as chief legislator. He can push through and encourage legislation. For example, the National Health Care Reform Bill is often referred to as Obamacare. Why? Because largely Obama, the president at the time of the passage, pushed this legislation as chief legislator. The president is automatically also the chief of his party. Therefore, President Obama, when he was president, acted as the head of, in this case, the Democratic Party, and spoke on behalf of Democrats nationwide. The president can also act as what's called chief citizen. He could act in a way that would be encouraging you to be a good citizen. For example, taking his wife and family on a vacation, or volunteering at a soup kitchen, or playing a pickup basketball game to get some exercise. How do you become president? The Constitution outlines some minimum requirements. You must be born as a natural citizen. So that excludes any immigrants. You must be at least 35. The youngest person elected president was John F. Kennedy. Now, I know Teddy Roosevelt was younger, but he was not elected at a younger age. He succeeded to the presidency with the assassination of McKinley. So the youngest elected president still is JFK. You have to have lived in the United States for a number of years, and of course numerous informal qualifications not listed in the Constitution. If the president were to become incapacitated or to die, the Presidential Succession Act of 1947 would kick in. Now, since 1947, this hasn't occurred, but the Vice President would succeed, then the Speaker of the House, President pro tem, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, and so on through the Cabinet. The Constitution only gives the Vice President two duties. One, to preside over the Senate, which, as we mentioned earlier, he doesn't do very often. And secondly, to help decide the ability of the President to conduct his work. Now, the office of Vice President can be assigned different duties and chores based on how much the President trusts or wants him to do things. The election, of course, we use what's called the Electoral College, and several times, though, before that, vice presidents have seceded into the presidency, but not further down than the vice president. So, of course, our own Gerald R. Ford, when Nixon resigned, we'll be covering that Watergate scandal a little later in this unit. The Electoral College is a group of people from each state who actually select the president, and we here in Michigan vote for our 16 electors. You get the number of electors is based on the number of representatives, in our case 14, we get to send to the House of Representatives, as we found out last unit, and of course 2 senators every state. So 14 plus 2 is 16. Michigan is entitled to 16 electoral votes. And based on how the state of Michigan votes, if the Democrats win or the Republicans win the majority in the presidential election in 2016, then all 16 of our electors would vote for that man or woman. The Electoral College is argued here in this commentary in the Grand Rapids paper that maybe we should split up those 16 electors instead of an all or nothing. It would be more fair because West Michigan usually votes more Republican and eastern side of the state normally votes more Democratic. So if you read through this cartoon, you can see the idea here is, well, wait a minute, the cartoonist really isn't in favor of that. He's saying, tough luck, Republicans, maybe you should put up a better candidate. Then also there comes a convention in the fall, the early fall. The parties will hold a convention and announce their delegates and their nomination delegates for each state, and also work on their platform and announce who the nominee is. We'll find out, and this was taped prior to the 2016 election. So at this point in this lecture, we don't know who the Republicans or Democrats will be nominating. Suffices to say, at the current time, Hillary Clinton is leading in the polls to be the Democratic nominee, and surprisingly, Donald Trump is leading the Republican nomination attempt. Then there will be primaries held prior to the election, and these primaries then will be help determine which candidate should be the nominee. Some states, like you see Iowa here, do still hold caucuses where they meet more informally and discuss the different candidates. As you noted, some of these candidates are already in Iowa trying to get their name recognized. We already mentioned the national conventions that are then held and discuss platforms. And so God has given these governments much power. We saw even Commander-in-Chief, the President can move troops, as you noted, around the world and extend and use that power, and God, of course, holds us accountable for how that is used and how the power of the sword is used not only to administer justice, but to go out into other countries as well.